Recognize the member for Fredericton Grand Lake and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and team, for being here today to answer these questions. I'm going to spend most of my time focusing on the Green Paper and some questions surrounding that. I don't think anybody, any reasonable person that understands the dynamic of our province would argue that we need some sort of change in how municipalities, LSDs, regional service commissions, all the different entities in relation to provincial government, that it needs to be reformed and changed. Make no bones about it, it's going to be a very difficult endeavor. You're talking about a real change in representation, or I should say potential for real change in representation, taxation and service delivery, which people in the municipalities at least have an avenue if they feel their taxes are too high or their services aren't good enough. They have that representation within the municipalities to be able to create some change there if they feel it's not adequate. People outside, on the other hand, don't really have that structure. So I guess I'll start off with my first question. In relation to discussions around municipal reform and specific to the Green Paper, what was the additional cost to the department that is just strictly on this endeavor for municipal reform?
Thank you for that question. Again, so regarding for last year's budget, or the cost for the Green Paper, which is $58,050, came from last year's budget, and for this year's we've allocated $300,000 for our reform process.
Thank you, Minister. So with the allocated money going forward, I think you said it was $300,000, is that correct? Is that money, I guess, how will that money be spent? I mean, we talking about, maybe hiring consultants or in lead up to more reports? Is it just expenditures in relation to traveling around the province? I guess, can you just give us a general breakdown of that $300,000?
So out of that 300,000, there is some consultants that we need that expertise sometimes that we don't have within the department. There is also the engagement process itself. So as you indicated, traveling around and making sure the rooms are set up. There's printing also, travel, and if there's additional studies also. So and studies meaning that there are some specific points, for example, that some members of the LSDs have brought up of late, and I know that because we talked about it. So yeah, specific points and specific questions which we didn't have the expertise, and we're looking at it. We haven't attributed any of those monies, but there are some questions that come up sometimes, and geez, by having discussions with New Brunswickers and LSDs and municipalities, the municipal associations have those funds, whereas LSD did not. So again, that's why, and again, there's always those discussions that come up. So.
Thank you, Minister. One part of smaller municipalities that is critical, I guess, to their ability to move forward is, of course, the equal opportunity funding. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think New Brunswick is one of maybe the only provinces that actually have that type of distribution of funding to municipalities. And I'm wondering, are you aware of any other provinces that do that type of that have that type of system in place to distribute funds to municipalities through a set criteria of processes and programs?
So once we do a jurisdictional scan, it is a great question. Every province has some type of operational funding or programs that help municipalities. On the specific wording for New Brunswick on unconditional grants, it definitely is different than other provinces. Earlier this week, I had a discussion with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing of Quebec, Madame André Laforêt, and she enumerated a lot of programs that are different than us. However, I think they still have the same vocation at the end of the day. So, so to your point, to the point in question, yes, there is some programs that are similar.
Thank you, Minister. With the talking with the Green Paper, and we talk about municipal reform, if we truly do have the reform that many people are anticipating, whether it's regional municipalities or some sort of different formula in how LSDs are represented, I can't imagine any scenario where the Equal Opportunity Program wouldn't have to be changed or moved around or set up differently. And I guess I would ask that, please correct me if I'm wrong in that, but when we talk about equal opportunity funding as it relates to municipal reform, is the department considering, things like how the formula currently works and how it needs to work going forward, any changes to the formula? And should there be some restrictions for municipalities on how that money's spent? I know one thing that I've heard, both good and bad, is the current Equal Opportunity Program, as far as I understand it, goes into general revenue of a municipality. They choose how they want to spend that money. But is there any discussions in the department to make it more restrictive, to say that that money can only be spent on certain items, certain categories within a municipality? And I guess equal opportunity as a whole, how it may change under a different municipal structure?
Mr. Chair, and to the member opposite, again, we are definitely looking to, I think the objective is to keep the spirit of the equality program. Are there going to be some changes? I think a lot of municipalities, as you've heard, I totally agree with you that they've been advocating. We have to remember that the formula is legislated, so if there is changes, we'll have to bring it to the House here. And we've definitely heard the same thing as you have just indicated, that maybe restrictions could be. Definitely some people have definitely talked about that, and as I indicated to the member of TACID, it's definitely a question, I think, that is always discussed on unconditional grant funding, because it's some municipalities need it because of their tax base. So it's something that we are definitely looking at the working committee of taxation. So to your point, I think our objective is to keep the spirit. Can changes be made? We are looking at that, and it is definitely a good question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, and I do, again, I believe that equal opportunity program is going to be a huge component in any type of municipal reform. A municipal reform outcome, I think, is inevitably, if it's a true reform package, it's inevitably going to change the way taxation works to a certain level, whether we talk about rates, and this is the biggest concern of rural residents, is that their rates obviously go up, but their services stay unchanged. Most people I talk to in rural areas, look, they don't expect much. That's why they live in rural areas. If they get their garbage picked up once a week, if they need emergency services in a reasonable time frame, and frankly some of that is lacking as it relates to policing, but their bottom line is their expectations aren't super high, because they understand they're getting a lower tax rate because of it. So when we talk about municipal reform and whatever that looks like at the end of the day, I'm just curious to how the provincial government may have an opportunity to relinquish some of the tax revenue back to these new zones or regional municipalities, whatever they look like. But I think in conjunction with that, there would inevitably be a need to also transfer responsibility maybe to some of these regional areas, or what these new municipalities look at. So I'm wondering if Minister, through you, Chair, could discuss a little bit about what that may look like. In the report, I read a lot about how the structural changes would happen. But what I failed to see, and maybe I just missed it, it could be in there, but the download of responsibility to these new regions, whatever they may look like.
member opposite, awesome question, thank you. There's not a day that goes by during this reform that LSDs are voicing their concerns, and I am there to work. We've elaborated great working committees that LSD members are part of, I think for the first time in a long time. We are working with LSDs because, as we know, municipalities have their associations, however, LSDs don't, so hence we are giving them that platform, and we want them to be part of the discussion. Regarding rural services, we want to keep rural, and I think that's, to your point, sir, it's definitely something that's really, really important that we keep, and we're being cognizant of that because people want to live that rural way of life in New Brunswick, and we definitely agree with that. However, there's some urban practices that are being done in rural settings, and that's where I have a problem, and I think New Brunswickers have a problem. So again, on taxation, there's not a day that goes by that people ask me that question, and we want to make sure that people that receive services are taxed properly, and that's my objective. To your point, you cannot increase taxes if you don't receive that extra service. And what people are paying today, our objectives through reform is that's what they should be paying after. But however, if they receive new services or services that they will have to pay. And again, they will have representation after this reform because there's 30% of the population that cannot vote at municipal election time, and that has to change. After 60 years, I think that 30% of New Brunswickers want to have the ability to change their quality of life, and they should have through an elected official. And regarding your specific question on responsibilities, which is an excellent question, it is, as I indicated, there are 23 services which are provided to New Brunswickers through municipal governments. And there's about 5 that, to your point, to the member, that are traditionally provincial government responsibilities. However, municipal governments have taken that responsibility sometime. We will talk about economic development, immigration, social development regarding food banks, for example, affordable housing in the Greater Moncton area and St. John. We talked about, I'm always missing one, sorry about that. However, so if we take those specific responsibilities, and we have been seeing that municipalities are taking care. So it begs the question, is the provincial government, or we like to say Fredericton sometimes, are they the best people to provide that services? And I know one thing, and one thing that our department definitely, local representatives know their regions, know their communities. And to your point, maybe that responsibility and the budget managed by provincial government should be given to municipalities because they know how to manage it best. And I've seen communities work with a little pot of money they're turning it in gold, and they know what their needs of their communities, and who's to say that Fredericton or the provincial government can do best? So I think, to your point, is there some responsibilities that can be transferred? Let's have the discussion. Let's have an open and frank discussion on those services. Immigration is definitely, right now, one of the most important files that will be living for our generation. And if we don't get it right, and municipalities have immigration officers, some municipalities have, which is federal provincial responsibilities, but municipalities are taking over because it's so important for the communities on economic development. So let's have that discussion. So to your point, transfer of responsibilities is definitely something that we want to engage, we want to have the discussion, and it's high time that we do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister, for that. And again, I can't see any, if we're talking about true, not just municipal reform, but included in that tax reform, I can't see any other scenario where that at least can't or shouldn't be discussed and how exactly that would work. And actually on page 9 of the green paper lays it out quite nicely in terms of responsibility, things like healthcare, education, social services, justice, and economic development fall under provincial government. And then you've got another column here that talks about local government, like police and fire, some roads, and I know there's some provincially designated highways that go through municipalities that are a little bit different. Public transportation, obviously, drinking water, wastewater, solid waste. So you can kind of see the differences there. Of course, the big expense items, the province obviously looks after things like healthcare and education. And I'm just wondering, specific with those two, kind of putting roads and infrastructure aside, but specific with roads and education, do you foresee any sort of, like other provinces have a specific tax for those categories, do you foresee any type of reform in that regard, that some of the responsibility is transferred in terms of cost to what a new regional municipality may look like?
Excellent question. Right now, as you know, the Premier has embarked on a new mandate. We are working on 5 specific areas. I think number 1 is managing the pandemic. We need to manage this pandemic, as it's not easy, and there's no magic solution. And I know you're part of the COVID cabinet and the COVID committee, and you have those excellent discussions there, so we're working on that. The Minister of Finance just tabled a progressive budget, probably one of the most progressive budgets seen in a long time, so I'm good for that. We're good for that. So healthcare, the Department of Health is doing the reforms right now. Minister Shepherd is moving forward on those reforms. The Minister Cardy tabled a green paper last year on education. So at the Department of Local Government and through our working committees, we have to, as you indicated, it's up to us to make sure that we align with these other reforms or discussions being held in those the departments. To the specific question, is there going to be a specific tax or responsibility? On those two, we have not discussed that whatsoever. And I know I think our neighboring provinces, they have a specific tax for that. Again, on taxation and finance, there is going to be a working committee. We'll work on those definitely ideas, and I think it's putting them on the table, but we want to make sure that I don't have no preconceived notion what will be in the report and the white paper, but as of yet, it's not something that we have discussed at one point.
Thank you, Minister. You know, we talk about municipal reform consultations and hearing from, you know, kind of average Joe, Jill, that type of thing, about what they would like to see. A lot of people that I talk to in rural areas, they're not, I don't know if you'd say political in nature. They don't, you know, they don't have a full grasp of how governments work and the levels of government and what a difference is between a regional service commission and electoral boundaries, for example. You know, a lot of confusion, and rightfully so. I mean, I've been in politics now for quite a while, and I still look at some of this stuff and scratch my head, hence the need for reform. But I guess in reaching out to the public to get their ideas of what they're concerned about, and a lot of them not fully understanding the whole dynamics of how it currently works or what a new model may even look like, what I hear, and I'm sure what you hear and other members in rural areas here, is, again, we don't want to see an increase in taxes without an increase in services or a decrease in services. So, you know, the kind of high-level things. But in creating this municipal reform plan or getting ideas for it, is the department going, I know you're going to public consultations in one sense, but are you also looking to people maybe in other jurisdictions that have helped provincial governments kind of guide their way through what these things look like? Is there any quote-unquote experts in taxation, in boundaries or democratic rights in terms of voting and representation, all of the components, the complexity of this file? Is the department reaching out to any specific experts on those issues?
Mr. Chair, to the member opposite, I think I'm with you. We're part of the Tim Hortons crowd. We love to go to our local coffee shop and talk politics, and I think we learn more there than in any exercise. And municipal reform and local government, it is complex. To your point, sir, I've been in politics or worked in the political world now for 25 years, and I'm still learning new things every day. So again, to the member from Fredericton South, when we talk about animal rights, I didn't know that animal rights were part of local government. So again, it's new to my department. But again, that's why through the budget process, there is a component, that $300,000 for consultants. So yes, there is specific subject matter experts that we will have to go see, and we want to go see them. Quite surprising, I think. What surprised me in this process is how the milieu associatif, the associations, have a wealth of knowledge. Wow, it's unbelievable, actually. So that's really important. And your point was, it's the best point of all. It is about the citizen, and it's up to us to make sure we have that conversation. So, for example, on LSDs, to your point, some people did not know the services they receive. So about the last month, we sent postcards to every people that lives in LSD to explain, one, what's the mapping of that LSD, and two, what are the different services provided and what costs. Moreover, for the first time, on our website, people can see the different postcards from the different LSDs. So I can actually see what's Chiparan paying, what's the people in Pointe-le-Pro paying to compare to the people in Wellsford, for example. So it's really interesting to have that dynamic discussion. It's really important that we do that. And so to your specific answer on consultants or subject matter experts, yes, we are definitely doing a jurisdictional scan. We have definitely talked to our neighboring provinces. I hope to have further discussions with my maritime provinces, certainly Nova Scotia, who has the county regional government, so that's really interesting to move forward. And that's how that $300,000, part of it will be on that, sir.
Thank you, Minister. And yeah, we totally agree on that point. I think at the end of the day, it's got to be, for the people. I mean, most people in municipalities, I live in a municipality, but most people that live in municipalities, I don't know what this is going to mean to them, municipal reform. It's neither here nor there maybe in most of their minds, at least from what I'm hearing. But once you cross that boundary outside the municipality, that's when people get a little anxious about what it means for them, because I think at the end of the day, they feel they have the most to lose in what the final outcome could be in this. So whatever outcome we have, the government decides to do with the reform, I know, at least I understand, what I've heard is that there would be no forced amalgamation. And I guess I would ask, is that still the case, that government is not considering forced amalgamation? And if it's not, what other methods would you foresee to be able to get some of this stuff enacted?
Thank you for your question. It's definitely a question that I get on a daily basis. And you brought up something specific, and I just want to open maybe that parenthesis on people outside municipalities feeling targeted. And that's, to your point, it has happened, because what happens, the municipal associations really take care and advocate for, they are an interest group just like anybody else. And as I indicated to the 8 Cities Association, I say, you advocate for the cities, but you have to realize that there is 30% of the population that don't live in cities. Have you reached out to them? And I asked the mayors on the specific questions, have you reached out to your local LSD? And sometimes, and I'm going to be honest, you see those alligator hands. There's some people that have never had that discussion. And these are the people, when l'Association francophone et municipalité parle about economic hubs, well, these cities have to realize that people from LSDs are not part of the problem. They want to be part of the solution. And it's important for municipalities to recognize that. So, super valid point. Regarding amalgamations, again, taxation is the first question. Amalgamations, are you going to force us to do anything? And I think part of this reform, and talking about jurisdictional scans, what have happened in Quebec, forced amalgamations on the long term don't work. However, there is, I'm not saying that it cannot happen, but it's not something that we're advocating. We want to make sure that people have those discussions now between them. And when the member of Tlakadi indicated, asked a specific question earlier, and I just want to reiterate how you look at the city of Hamilton and the town of Dalhousie. When reform started, they said to each other, how about we sit down and talk to each other? For the first time in 60 years, the two councils sat down and started planning. And it wasn't forced on anyone, but again, to your point, we want to elevate that discussion on reform and what's the possibilities on regional collaboration, communities of interest. And there's great things happening right now, so let's hope with this discussion, communities can get together and start talking. And again, bring democracy to that 30% of New Brunswickers that don't have it now. So again, and the mayor of Plaster Rock said it the best. It's not about amalgamation or force, it's about unification and how can we work together on economic development and communities of interest. So I know it's a long answer, but it is a pointing question today, and that's why I took a little bit more time on that question, sir.
Yeah, never a need to apologize for length of answering. Yeah, that's good information, Minister. I appreciate that. I guess I'm just trying to understand it, though, for myself. If somebody has to make the decision, if you're talking about going from, say, municipalities to for example, a regional municipality, as they've done in other places, somebody has to make that decision, or there has to be some process to come to that decision in a formal sense. So, and I know you said forced amalgamation is not something you want, which tells me there's a little bit of a door open there that the possibility may happen. But if that's not the direction government goes, would you be looking at like a plebiscite, a referendum, some sort of voting mechanism that people outside or even within that region, proposed region of change, would have an actual say in that? I mean, what type of options would be there as opposed to forced amalgamation?
I think, again, part of the reform process is that we're elaborating working committees. And part of the first pillar, structure, I love how you said representation also. That's really important. We all elect people to make decisions for us. And to your point, it is a complex question. And we hope through the deliberations on that working committee on structure and representation that we can have a better outlook. Because we know that providing 30% of those New Brunswickers the ability to vote will have a change in structure. And what does structure mean? Structure, well, structure means that we have 6 structures right now that people can have local governance: cities, towns, villages, LSDs, regional communities, and rural communities. Are there other opportunities? We've elaborated in the green paper 9 opportunities. So there is more for representation. So again, let's work with the working committees. Let's hear what New Brunswickers have to say. And we'll have that what's heard document, and let's see how it goes. But the structures that we have today, you will need, and I think this part of the reform is to having a new structure also, or a new mode of representation. So let's see where that brings us.
Thank you, Minister. So, and again, I don't mean to be redundant here, but just so I understand, is there any appetite, willingness for some sort of referendum or plebiscite to be included in boundary changes?
It's something part of the reform that will be discussed, or the working committees that will be discussed. If definitely people advocate for such an exercise, it is one of the things that could be on the docket. However, personally, I think to move forward, I think these working committees, the associations, we've looked at it for the last 25 years. People are looking for the ability to make change, and we'll definitely look at it. However, it's not something that's on the table now, and we'll see where the reform process and these working discussions bring us by the end of the summer, early fall.
Thank you, Minister. yesterday, no, maybe the day before, I don't know, when we get in committees it all becomes a blur, but at some point this week I was questioning the Minister of Public Safety on policing. And I'm sure as a Minister of Local Government, I'm sure you get a lot of emails from, you know, mayors of small villages, towns, maybe some LSD chairs that have real concerns around policing specific to rural areas. And I use the example of, you know, the city of Fredericton. My understanding is response times for an emergency, I think they consider it maybe a code 3 or whatever the terminology is, but a real emergency, policing emergency in the city of Fredericton, response time is like under 4 minutes. It's very quick, which again is a dream for rural areas in the same situation. And, you know, I don't think the expectation is there in rural New Brunswick for that type of quick response or quick emergency service at their disposal. Even Ambulance New Brunswick has different times, obviously, for urban areas and rural areas, and most people in rural areas certainly understand that. What I am concerned with, however, is that the gap is getting so big in policing response times that there's real significant concern among rural people, rural leaders, and small town leaders that are saying the policing is just not there. And you know, whether it's a theft or even a real, you know, same situation of a code 3, it often takes the police quite a while to show up. And if it's not a code 3, they may not show up at all, or maybe within a day or two, which many people would agree is unacceptable. So my question, I say all that to ask the question, when we talk about municipal reform, it's going to change, I would think, service delivery. So specific to policing, would the possibility be there for regional policing? And just to give you an example, if all of a sudden the regions changed and the boundaries changed for Fredericton and it became the greater Fredericton municipality and swallowed up, say, Minto and Chipman, would that then include policing, that the city of Fredericton maybe would police the villages of Minto and Chipman and in between? Is policing part of the reform discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, one of those principal services like fire protection, EMO, and policing are definitely looked at the reform process, during the reform process. I had the privilege to sit down with our CMP Superintendent Larry Tremblay a month ago, and again, it is something that we are definitely looking at. As you know, the Department of Local Government is only a conduit through the citizenry or the municipalities or our municipal structures to public safety. It is a public safety question, and I'll leave the Minister of Public Safety to discuss on that. But yes, it is definitely a subject matter that we are going to discuss on reform. I think, to your point, remember that policing is definitely talked about. Again, we'll have to do a heavy discussion. In different regions, we have different specific subjects that are important. Policing, I would say, in probably 4 or 5 regions, it is definitely a priority, and they want to talk about it. So we want to talk collaboratively, work with the different police associations. What are the different options? I think when I did my memoir or my thesis at the University of Moncton, I used actually the decision-making process for the town of Shediac to move from on policing services back in 1992. So it's something I definitely know of. It's something that people are definitely asking me. You're not the only person which raises it. So thank you for the question today. And it's something that we are trying to, again, to facilitate, to see if there's an openness for communities to get together on services such as policing. Again, however, we have to realize it is not the realm of our government, my department on responsibilities, but public safety. And when it comes to public safety matters, we work with public safety. They are the subject matter experts on that.
And I think that, and thank you for the answer, and I think, that discourse, just further highlights the complexity of what we're talking about when we talk about municipal reform. And I think it's going to have its kind of tentacles in every aspect of service delivery, taxation, policing, emergency response, recreation. I mean, the list goes on and on. And it really depends on what the outcome actually is. We can talk about municipal reform. There's a lot of options, and that's why when the green paper come out, I thought it was pretty good. I thought, it laid out the challenges, it laid out the options to face those challenges. Didn't seem to take a position one way or the other on what those options may be. But again, this is going to be a big file, or maybe it won't. Maybe at the end of the day, it could just be a little more power to the regional service commissions, to try to, change things around a little bit, which would be, I would think, be somewhat minimal. One part of the green paper that stood out to me, and I think because we had been advocating for this change for so long, it relates specifically to tax classes or tax codes for municipalities. From what I understand, New Brunswick is the only province that I'm aware of that doesn't allow municipalities to have tax classes. Like right now, it's basically residential and non-residential. Other municipalities in other provinces, they've got residential, they've got commercial, they've got industrial. They've got different zones that they can change the rates for each category. So they may say, municipality may say, we need to, increase our businesses here in our town or village or city, so we're going to lower the business tax rate and maybe increase the residential tax rate. On the other hand, it may say we have a thriving business in our community, we're going to increase the business tax rate a little bit, lower the residential tax rate to get more people in. So at the end of the day, it gives the local government some real ability, to kind of chart their own course on what they need in their municipality as it relates to taxes. Because taxation does have an effect. I mean, some people, may choose to move to an area that has lower taxes. A business may go to a municipality that has lower taxes. So it creates almost somewhat of a healthy competition, I think, to be able to adjust those tax rates.
Yes, we are looking to change the tax codes and tax classes and give that ability of healthy competition. I like that too, so thank you. Because again, if a community wants to provide a service, well, it's their ability to do that, and that's why they elect officials like us to manage those services. So to your point, it is greatly needed. It is part of our green plan. It's one of those opportunities to change the tax classes, and it's definitely on our radar.
Municipal reform, I think, is important, but again, I do have to stress, as has been stressed multiple times, is we just have to ensure rural residents don't get shafted in the midst of this, and that there's that equity and balance in terms of service delivery, taxation, rural way of life, and everything that goes with it. But I appreciate your responses today, Minister, and your staff that helped prepare some of the answers. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.